At 63, Axl Rose is finally speaking out about one of rock music's most talked about rivalries. For decades, the Guns N' Roses frontman has remained tight-lipped about Nirvana and its late frontman Kurt Cobain until now. What he said has shocked longtime fans. Join us as we unpack Axl Rose's surprising words and explore the complex beef between Guns N' Roses and Nirvana, the kings of 80s rock. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, few bands were as massive as Guns N' Roses. They weren't just another rock band, they were a cultural force. Their music was loud, raw, and aggressive, capturing the rebellious spirit of rock and roll like no other group at the time. From their early days playing in small clubs to selling out stadiums around the world, Guns N' Roses became the definition of excess, both in their music and their lifestyles. When Guns N' Roses released their debut album, Appetite for Destruction, in 1987, it took a while to catch on, but once it did, it changed rock music forever. The album was filled with hard-hitting songs that had a dangerous edge. Tracks like Welcome to the Jungle, Sweet Child of Mine, and Paradise City weren't just popular, they became anthems for a generation. The album was different from the polished rock music of the time. It wasn't clean or safe. It was gritty, unpredictable, and wild, just like the band itself. Appetite for Destruction went on to sell over 30 million copies worldwide, making it one of the best-selling albums of all time. It proved that rock and roll didn't need to be glamorous to be successful. It just needed to be real. By 1991, Guns N' Roses had already become rock superstars, but they weren't done yet. They released 2 albums on the same day, Use Your Illusion first and second. These albums showed a different side of the band. While they still had their signature hard rock sound with songs like You Could Be Mine and Don't Cry, they also experimented with longer, more emotional tracks like November Rain and Estranged. The Use Your Illusion albums proved that Guns N' Roses weren't just a party band, they could write powerful, complex music too. Their live shows became legendary, featuring Axl Rose running across the stage, Slash delivering iconic guitar solos, and the entire band pushing the limits of what a rock concert could be. They sold out stadiums worldwide, setting attendance records and making history as one of the biggest rock bands of all time. At the center of it all was Axl Rose, the band's often unpredictable and passionate frontman. He was one of the most charismatic yet controversial figures in rock music. Known for his intense performances, powerful voice, and wild behavior, Axl could be both mesmerizing and frustrating. He was famous for showing up late to concerts, getting into fights with fans and reporters, and delivering explosive rants on stage. His temper and attitude made headlines, but so did his talent. He was known for his impressive vocal range, and during performances he frequently commanded attention with his presence. Axl wasn't just a rock star, he was a larger-than-life personality. His behavior sometimes created problems for the band, but it also made them unpredictable and exciting. Fans never knew what would happen at a Guns N' Roses concert, and that only added to their legend. Guns N' Roses didn't just make music about wild living, they lived it. They became infamous for their non-stop partying, reckless behavior, and love of excess. Drugs, alcohol, and chaos followed them everywhere. During their early years, they spent most of their time either recording music or partying. They got kicked out of hotels, started fights, and lived life without limits. Some band members like Slash and Duff McKagan nearly died from drug and alcohol abuse. Their lifestyle was dangerous, but it was also part of what made them feel so real to their fans. This wasn't just an image, it was who they were. Unlike many bands who pretended to be rebellious, Guns N' Roses actually lived like rock stars in every way. That wild lifestyle eventually led to internal conflicts, lineup changes, and long breaks from music, but it also cemented their place as legends of rock. Guns N' Roses ruled the late 80s and early 90s with their music attitude and raw energy. But while they were at the top of the world, a new movement in rock music was about to challenge everything they stood for. And that's where Nirvana and Kurt Cobain come into the story. The birth of grunge. By the early 1990s, rock music was about to change forever. The flashy, over-the-top style of 80s rock was beginning to fade, and something new was on the rise: grunge. At the heart of this movement was Nirvana, a band from Aberdeen, Washington, that would go on to define an entire generation. Their 1991 album Nevermind didn't just introduce grunge to the world, it completely reshaped the music industry. With its raw sound, emotional lyrics, and rejection of rockstar glamour, Nevermind became the soundtrack of a new era. Leading the charge was Kurt Cobain, a singer and songwriter who never wanted to be a celebrity but found himself at the center of a revolution. When Nevermind was released in September 1991, no one expected it to change music. At first, record labels didn't think Nirvana would be much more than a small underground band. But when their song Smells Like Teen Spirit hit the airwaves, everything changed. The song had loud, distorted guitars, heavy drums, and Cobain's unique voice, a mix of quiet vulnerability and explosive screams. It was nothing like the polished rock music that dominated MTV. Teenagers connected with it instantly. It was raw, real, and full of emotion. Within months, Nevermind knocked Michael Jackson's Dangerous off the top of the charts. This wasn't just a hit album, it was a cultural shift. Suddenly, grunge became the new face of rock. Bands like Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, and Alice in Chains rose to fame alongside Nirvana, and the entire music industry had to adapt. The big hair, leather pants, and flashy performances of the 80s were out. Flannel shirts, ripped jeans, and a don't-care attitude were in. Nirvana couldn't have been more different from Guns N' Roses. While Guns N' Roses was larger than life, with stadium tours, expensive music videos, and elaborate stage shows, Nirvana did the opposite. Their live performances were simple and unpolished. Cobain would sometimes purposely play out of tune, knock over his equipment, or just walk off stage. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. Unlike Axl Rose, who thrived on being a rock star, Cobain hated the spotlight. Even their fashion choices reflected this contrast. Guns N' Roses dressed like rock gods with leather jackets, bandanas, and sunglasses. Nirvana wore thrift store clothes, messy hair, and old sneakers. They weren't trying to look cool, they just didn't care about fashion. Their music was different, too. Guns N' Roses' songs were often about partying and wild living, while Nirvana's lyrics explored pain, depression, and feeling like an outsider. Cobain sang about real emotions that many young people related to, and that made him different from the rock stars who came before him. While Axl Rose embraced the rock and roll lifestyle, Kurt Cobain wanted nothing to do with it. He didn't like interviews, didn't care about awards, and felt uncomfortable being called the voice of a generation. Cobain hated how quickly Nirvana had become famous. He didn't want to be part of the mainstream music industry. He saw it as phony, greedy, and corrupt. While Guns N' Roses enjoyed their wealth and success, Cobain was ashamed of it. Cobain also rejected the macho attitude that many rock bands had in the 80s. He was openly against homophobia and racism, and he spoke about these issues in interviews. He didn't fit the stereotype of a typical rock frontman, and that made him even more relatable to fans who felt like outsiders. Before their infamous feud, Axl Rose actually admired Nirvana. In the early 90s, when Nevermind was taking over the world, Axl publicly praised the band. He even called their album the best of the year in interviews. This was a big deal coming from someone like Axl, who was known for having strong opinions and not giving compliments lightly. Axl wasn't just a casual fan. He showed his support in very public ways. He was even spotted wearing a Nirvana hat on stage during Guns N' Roses concerts. This was his way of showing respect, signaling that he saw Nirvana as an important band in the rock world. But Axl didn't just admire Nirvana from afar. He took things a step further by inviting them to tour with Guns N' Roses and Metallica in 1992. This could have been a major opportunity for Nirvana. Guns N' Roses were still one of the biggest bands on the planet, and touring with them would have put Nirvana in front of massive stadium crowds. The declined tour offer. By 1992, both Guns N' Roses and Nirvana were two of the biggest bands in the world, but they represented completely different styles of rock. Axl Rose, who had initially admired Nirvana, took a big step by inviting them to join Guns N' Roses and Metallica on tour. It was a massive opportunity, playing in front of stadium crowds every night, gaining new fans, and being part of one of the biggest rock tours of the decade. But Nirvana wanted no part of it. Kurt Cobain didn't just turn down the offer, he rejected it in the most public way possible. In interviews, he openly mocked Guns N' Roses, calling them macho posturing and empty-headed rock nonsense. To Cobain, Guns N' Roses represented everything he despised about mainstream rock: the excess, the ego, and the obsession with fame and money. Nirvana had built their identity on rejecting that culture, and there was no way Cobain was going to share a stage with a band that, in his eyes, stood for all the wrong things. Axl Rose didn't take this well. To Axl, this wasn't just about Nirvana saying no to a tour. It felt personal. He had supported Nirvana, praised Nevermind, and even worn their merch on stage. He likely saw Cobain's rejection as an insult, not just to him, but to the entire legacy of Guns N' Roses. Axl had worked his way up from nothing, becoming one of the biggest rock stars in the world. He expected some level of mutual respect. Instead, he got public humiliation, and the insults didn't stop there. Courtney Love, Kurt Cobain's wife, added fuel to the fire. She had no problem voicing her opinions about Axl, calling him the biggest ego in music. This only made things worse. Axl had always been known for his fiery temper, and he wasn't the type to just ignore an attack. From this point on, any chance of friendship or collaboration between Nirvana and Guns N' Roses was gone. The rivalry had officially begun, and it would only get worse from here. Things came to a boiling point when Axl and Kurt finally came face-to-face backstage at the MTV Video Music Awards, setting the stage for one of the most explosive confrontations in rock history. The infamous 1992 MTV Video Music Awards.